Honorable Justice Mustaq is here.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, I'm muted. Okay. Thank you for joining with us and agreeing for this.
I'm very honored.
Okay.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. It's our pleasure and privilege. We can proceed.
Yes, sir. Shall we start the meeting, sir?
Yeah.
Officially?
You can start. I think people are here.
Good evening, everyone. Honorable Justice Mohammed Mustaq, our learned senior counsel, Advocate Sumati Dandapani, Advocate C. Mandini, the member secretary, Advocate Sri Nisar Ahmed, I suppose sir has not been able to log in. And dear friends, we are holding this session for your benefit, mainly because we have been regularly interacting with victims, and we have been dealing with their emotional and mental health, and in our pursuit to see to it that they get back to the mainstream as a survivor. So in this process, as a coordinator and, well, of course, as a team as a whole, we have been feeling that we need a lot of refresher courses. And so we have now an expert with us to handle a session on victim psychology. I'll introduce the speaker to you. She's Dr. Ashlesha Bagadia. She is a perinatal psychiatrist and head of psychotherapy at the Green Oak Initiative, which is a community mental health center in Bangalore. She did training in psychiatry from Southwest London and St. George's NHS Trust, UK. And she had advanced training at Adelaide, Australia, and completed certificate of completion of specialist training in family systems psychotherapy. She also completed a fellowship in perinatal psychiatry and women's mental health from Canada through the University of Toronto before returning to India 7 years ago. She's an external researcher with the Department of Perinatal Psychiatry at NIMHANS and is involved with developing screening pathways for perinatal mental health disorders. She runs a MBT group therapy program. I understand it's mentalization-based therapy, if I'm not wrong, doctor. It's a MBT group therapy program for people with borderline personality disorder, and collaborates with other clinicians to help manage similar conditions. She runs a certificate course in Foundations of Psychodynamic Psychotherapy in collaboration with Mount Carmel College, Bangalore University, and conducts workshops on various skills for counselors, psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists, and mental health clinicians from any background. She has a certified expertise in trauma-focused therapy, and we consider it our privilege, doctor, to have you with us today, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much. I'm indeed honored and quite humbled also to be in the presence of, I think, people with much more experience in working with, say, trauma and violence. Of course, my experience is from after trauma has occurred, and we are trying to help them out in coping with it. What I thought I will do today is just give you a background in trying to understand what are the psychological sort of underpinnings or principles that can affect a victim. I am aware, as you said rightly, Mrs. Parvati, that this might be the first of many sessions for us to really understand what is required for your center, like the Victim Rights Center, in adequately helping all the victims that come your way. But today I'm just going to focus a little bit on the principles of victim psychology. And I would like, if possible, for to have more time for interaction where people can, talk about specific examples, and then that will make it easier for us to explore it in detail. So I'll give a little theoretical background, but I don't want to make it very theory heavy. I want us to use some practical examples from all of you. So I hope we can do that as well. Can I share my screen?
Mini?
Yeah, I'm able to share.
Yeah.
Just tell me if you are able to. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I understand, just for my clarification, there are some psychologists in your team as well in the Victim Rights Center. So some of this, what I'm going to say, may not be new, but this is something that has consistently been proven. What can happen to a person who is either subjected to some kind of trauma, violence as a sudden event, or has been subjected over a long period of time. And so what we might want to think is, what are these abusive environments, right? So you may be seeing victims who are being exposed to something that has happened as a sudden event, one event, but more often than not, if you're seeing people who have been exposed to what is called as an abusive environment, as subject to violence. But violence is just one thing. Sometimes what we call as abusive can also be something like a neglectful environment, or an environment where, the communication of the victim is put down so often that they don't know how else to communicate. So there might be physical violence, of course, but emotionally also, their communication experience are met by inappropriate and extreme responses. Keep quiet. What do you know? You don't know anything. So that constant kind of messaging can be also very detrimental to a victim, not just the physical act alone. In fact, there is also evidence to show that even if someone has not physically even laid a hand on a person, if they are constantly neglected, that can have even more a detrimental effect than just violence, because neglect is even worse, where you're not even accepting the presence of that person. So of course, physical and sexual abuse is something that can be very, very difficult, especially if it is within the family setting, where there is breaking of boundaries, where you don't understand whether this is something that is all right. The child may not understand this is okay, this is not okay. So it's not clear whether this person should be looking after me or hurting me. And that can really play with the victim's mind. What can also be abusive if there is alcohol or drugs involved in the abuser is that sometimes that creates in the victim's mind that, oh, this person is behaving like this because of the alcohol. They're behaving like this because of the substance. Otherwise, they're a nice person. So that can also be contributing quite heavily to the abusive environment. Another way of some environment or a situation can be abusive, especially for children, but also for, say, in a marital relationship, is when there is an expectation that everything should be perfect. And if it is not, then there is a lot of criticism. Or if there is a lot of expressed emotion that, oh, if you don't behave like this, I'm going to do something to myself. So that kind of expressed emotion, threatening, criticizing, expecting someone to behave a certain way can be a very abusive environment. Now, I'm talking about this not only in a family setting, but if you think about people who are growing up in different circumstances, either in a, if the child is sort of growing up, say, in a prison, or growing up in a foster care setting or a juvenile setting, it is very possible that even a supportive system can end up becoming abusive without intending to do so, right? So especially if there is the expectations of how the child should grow up are not being met by the system around. The institution feels like this person is not meeting their expectations. So all of these different things can be looked at as an abusive environment, and different victims can have a different impact depending on which is the one they're most sensitive to. So what can happen if someone is exposed to, I'm using the common term, like general term was abusive, but it could be violence, it could be a very serious trauma, or a series of chronic low-grade trauma that is going on over years. The effect of that on the victim is that, first of all, there is no label. They are not able to have any space to talk about their emotions. So they are learning slowly but surely that if I say something about myself, it's not going to be received well. So they also start doing this in other settings. They feel like, okay, if the person who is loves me, is in my family, is not able to understand my emotions, who else will understand? So they start learning that there is no space for expressing emotions. And if it happens from a young age, they learn it even before they realize it. So what ends up happening when we see, say young people who have had long years of being told not to express themselves or being put down or criticized, they are not even able to identify the emotions. They start by saying, I'm okay. I don't know. I feel okay. Because they don't actually know what is it that they should be feeling. And sometimes when we encourage them and we say, no, if I came late, so you must be upset if I'm late. So they sometimes even tell me, what should I be feeling? Surely there is an answer you're looking for. I must give you the correct answer, because they don't, it has been so deeply ingrained in them that you should not feel anything, you don't have any space. So they learn without realizing this, putting themselves down. And what can end up happening, especially in the early years in traumatic relationships, is, let's say the husband is hitting the wife. I'm using a common example, but it could be any other similar example. So she might, cry, scream, it doesn't bother him. But if she raises a big hangama and makes a big noise about it, maybe he will keep quiet. So what she's learning is also that I have to create a big noise, only then people will pay attention. So just by saying something, asking something nicely, she did not get. Only when she created a big scene, she got something. So this can happen in children also. When we see children who are behaving badly, as we might call, when they behaved well, they didn't get any attention. When they screamed is when their father hit them. So it's almost like, at least I got the attention when I screamed. So they learn that when I behave badly, I get an attention. And that teaches extreme displays get strongly rewarded. And sometimes even that negative attention is better than no attention. So they learn this, rewarding happens with extreme displays. It also encourages them to conceal their emotions. And if they learn to conceal, then they never learn how to manage it. So they're always up and down, up and down. Sometimes they're so distressed because there is so much baggage. They can also be very distressed about a very small thing. And it may seem like, what is this? This is not so upsetting. But because they have suppressed and suppressed and suppressed, it comes out as a big thing sometimes when they didn't mean to. And of course, it affects their self-esteem. One of the biggest problems that we encounter when people have had chronic trauma or, large trauma that has not been acknowledged is that they don't know how to seek help also. Because they don't know, I should, like, especially, let's say, for example, with mental health professionals, they ask for an appointment. If we say we can't give it today, we'll give it to you next week. They don't know if they should wait or they should create a big scene. Only then we will quickly give them because it's an emergency. They don't know that if they tell us what is going on, we'll be able to help them. Rather than that, they try to cover up because they think that we are going to judge them. So, how do I tell my problem? Also, they don't know. They don't know how do I express myself so I'll get the right help. They're scared that we will also abuse them, hurt them, judge them. We may not physically harm them, but we'll do all these emotional things that other people have done because that's the only experience they've had. So their ability to solve problems also gets impaired, right? So you may give them some solutions. You may give them, look, this is the way, this is your pathway to safety. This is the course that law is giving you. This is the support you can get. But they are not able to connect the pieces. They are not able to solve the problems effectively. Their ability to tolerate the distress has gone down. They're either used to shutting it out or expressing in a very distressed way and again being shut down. So their ability to solve problems on a day-to-day basis goes down. Their ability to think, okay, how do I keep myself safe? What do I do to, stand up to him? Or what do I do to take my child to safety? All that gets impaired because they're constantly being traumatized. And when they come to help, by the time they come to us, and this may happen to you also, by the time they come for help, because they've met with such extreme behaviors, they might start having extreme expectations also, right? Like they may not be able to understand the balance of what needs to be told when, how do I, what can I expect from the judiciary system? What can I expect from a doctor? What can I expect from my husband? So they have unrealistic expectations because that is what's been expected of them. So they don't know how to balance it out, right? Another thing, so the factors that I feel we should be keeping in mind in our Indian setting, and this is the most common thing that happens to victims, is what is called as learned helplessness, which I will elaborate on. And that is something very common, and it kind of is there in all of us a little bit, like especially if we think of the larger picture, the roads in Bangalore are horrible right now, as you all may have heard, and we'll complain, something happens, somebody fixes it, again it goes, we complain. So over time, we are like, this is how it is. What can we do? We can't do anything. So we have also become helpless. Some of us will say, we can't do anything, leave it. We have to just suffer through it. Some people will say, no, we'll fight. Some people will complain. But that learned helplessness that I have learned now that there is no point in complaining. So I've become helpless and I'm just putting up with it. So different ways in which we all experience things that we are constantly trying to change, which is not in our hands, or we have been put down, or there are so many factors that are affecting it that we learn a way of managing that is just that nothing's going to change. And I'll tell you some more details about learned helplessness. But it is something that is there in so many settings in India that when it encounters, like, let's say a young bride has encountered it in so many ways, where she has sort of say been forced to not study further or been forced into marriage. She gets married and she has to look after her in-laws. Then she moves town. So there are so many things that have gone against her. And even in the morning, she has to maybe encounter power cut. There's no water. Something else happens. Today the maid doesn't come. That so many things we are already accepting and saying, okay, this is how it is. This is how it is. When there is abuse, it is very easy to slip into that role. Okay, this is how it is, right? So in India, especially, it is just another extension of all the other things we are putting up with that can easily translate to learned helplessness in the victim. And that becomes a very difficult thing to work against for someone who's trying to help them. And I will explore that a little bit more. But the other main important factor in our Indian setting is a cultural stigma. If I do something, what will people think of me? Even before they come to you, another thing that the abuser can tell them is something they must have done to provoke them. Something they must have done to make it happen. It somehow must be their fault. If they do something, they will be blamed. Why are you doing this? Right? So the stigma of actually standing up against an abuser, standing up against a perpetrator can be so huge. I think you shared an example where, a mother is not willing to stand up against her husband, even when there is sexual abuse to the extent where the daughter is impregnated. Right?
It's very common. It's very common here.
It is shocking, isn't it? I mean, if I read for the first time, it is like, oh my God. But if it is common already, you can imagine how hard it must be to fight against it. For you also, but also for the woman who is there. A big factor, and this may be a factor for you, is the financial dependence on the husband. For many women, if they are going to stand up against their husbands, what does it mean for them? Maybe it is better to be with this abusive guy because at least I know all the bad things about him. If I leave him and stand up against him, who will look after me? What will I end up with that may be even worse than this? So that financial dependence and cultural stigma is a huge barrier. Okay. And of course, I'm so glad to hear about your work because it looks like you are trying to build a resource of safety. But it is such a difficult thing for women to access, right? They're not sure who is on their side. Can they trust the system? If they stand up, how far will the system hold their hand? After which, what are they going to be left with? And this is the reality, we can do as much as we can, but ultimately, a lot of the victims have reached this point, not being empowered at all. And then they don't have any other, you may be the part of their lives for 5 or 10 years. After that, they feel like we'll be on our own anyway. What will I do then? So I would rather stay with this terrible guy because I know what he's done and I don't want to even think of what after that. Another factor that can happen in situations like this, like you said, it is very common, there's sexual abuse, is, the taboo against anything related to sexual abuse or talking about sexual relations is so huge. It is quite a shameful thing for the mother to stand up and say, yes, my husband did this, or to do something about it. Because again, there is this sense, we are so, in our minds, it is ingrained that somehow it must be the victim's fault. Somehow it must be the daughter's fault. The mother should not have let it happen. What was she doing? Why didn't she protect her? Maybe she was not, sorry for my crude language, maybe she was not giving it to him in the bed. That's why he got mislaid. So there are so many things that they have grown up hearing. And, it is there in our cultural kind of sort of ingrained that somehow the victim must be at fault. even without intending to. And I don't think there is an intention. But I think sometimes the way they might be asked the question, what were you doing at that time? Where were you? Why you were there at that time? So that somehow in that mind, when they're already thinking they must be to blame, makes it even more concrete. So it is very difficult for women who are already in this learned helpless stage to then sort of figure their way out of it, right? So just to tell you a little bit more about learned helplessness. Now, what can happen is we are all adapting and learning and growing. So day-to-day things, if I come to Kerala and stay there for a few months, I will learn how to adapt to a humid weather. I might learn, how to manage, drink more water. If you come to a cold weather, you will learn how to adapt. So we all learn to adapt because we are generally adaptive species by nature. But when you are constantly being put down, you're in an abusive environment, your capacity to adapt stops. Your capacity to sort of, I need to do this stops. Your only capacity is to survive, right? All I have to do is survive. I cannot grow. I cannot problem solve. I just have to keep myself safe. So their entire mindset goes in keeping themselves safe. And what they start learning is that, and it's the quicker they learn, the better for their safety, is that things will go wrong. It is guaranteed that he's going to hit me and I won't have any control over it. That is what their brain has learned now over time. If they don't learn that, they will expect more things. They will be hopeful. They will think, oh, today he's going to be very happy with what I made. But if they expect things to go wrong, then they will be prepared when they finally get abused. Or they will be prepared and they won't be hurt so bad. And they also learn that they'll be unsuccessful. They would have tried many times to try to please I'm talking about, say, if there is domestic violence in a family setting or domestic violence, say, in a group setting, in a institutional setting where it's constantly happening. They're learning now that whatever they try, they're unsuccessful. So even when there is a potentially solution is there, they have learned that it's going to not help. And this part is where it becomes very difficult to help them. Because you might tell them, that, look, you can do this. But they are not able to look at that from your angle because they have learned, their brain has learned to be helpless. Because the helplessness is what keeps them safe. If they become strong and start opposing, that is not going to keep them safe, right? So their whole kind of mindset is geared towards staying safe, surviving, staying safe, surviving. That's all they're able to do. And it's a very, what we call as like a primal level, right? It's not at a higher mental level. So that is much harder to reach. So when we are, say, if we are hungry, we cannot concentrate, no matter how intelligent we are, if the brain is not getting the oxygen. So primal level, when something is affected, no matter how strong we are, intelligent we are, our resources will go down. Our capacity to solve problems goes down. So this learned helplessness is happening at a primal level because it is constantly being hammered into the brain. So just to give you an example, in terms of the stages in which it develops, and you might have seen, movies about violence. I don't know if any of you have seen, I've got a clip, that movie Darlings that was recently released on Netflix. It tells you lots of these movies where they show violence or abuse or even serials or clips. It tells you how that helplessness can develop, but it tells you more also how can, the abuser also create a system where it looks like they're actually going to get better. So in the beginning stages, there is a tension, something is going to happen, that something they did, maybe they made a mistake or they burned the food or they made a noise and he's getting angrier and angrier. So the victim starts feeling tempted to please him, submit to his demands, but it doesn't work and they act out. So the violence or the abuse occurs. Immediately after the violence, especially when the abuser has come from a background of also having problems of their own, they may apologize. They may say, no, I'm sorry. I won't do this again. I'll change. It was the alcohol. You provoked me. If you had not, cooked it so badly, I would not have done. If you had not pushed me to pay the bill just now, I would not have done anything, right? So it makes it look like it's not their fault. So they will change. And then stage 4, there's this calm period where abuser is behaving as if nothing has happened. Victim starts to believe, oh, they've changed. Simply, I was getting worried, and then the whole cycle starts again because they make a mistake and the tension builds. And then, so what this can do is that it keeps them in this stage where they just want to keep pleasing him because they don't want this to happen. And they keep hoping that this will come back. This was such a nice period of hope being instilled in them, right? And that hope is very, very attractive to them because they feel like, they will change. They will change. I will, if you permit me, show you that clip. Let me see. Just this one. Factors that can impact on learned helplessness. So we know that if the victim is older, like if they've experienced abuse for a long period, they are more likely to be helpless. The earlier you can intervene, the better, because then at least they may still have some desire to stop the abuse and make it work. But the older they are, the more longer they've been exposed to it, the harder it is to help them see the solutions. And of course, like I mentioned, all the other external factors, which I feel will be your bigger enemy. If they're poor, they don't have resources, there is a lot of pressure in the society. We know that there are enough people, as many people as you are, to advise them to get help, do the right thing. There are 10 times more people to tell them, why are you getting into this? Don't do this, don't do this, right? So there are other factors. And of course, some other factors that can clearly impact is if they themselves have a lot of distress, anxiety, or depression, or trauma symptoms. In this example that you gave me, it can also happen that the mother herself may have been abused, like by the father, if there is violence. So for her, it may be about keeping the peace of the house. It may be about how much, like, I want, because the daughter will grow up and go and get married or whatever, I can sort her out, but afterwards I have to live with this husband. So her own sort of trauma response, anxiety, worry may be preventing her from taking all the right steps, right? So her own incapacity to deal with this may be preventing. It may seem like such a callous thing. How can she be so hard-hearted? How can she, not even think about her daughter? But if you think about all the things that would have led her to reach that stage, we don't even know. Especially evidence tells us that if there is this kind of abuse in the family, there is possible marital rape also. So she might have undergone marital rape, had been abused by her husband. So she may not have any resources to stop it. So one of the ways to please her husband is to not do anything about it. So there are so many things that she might be dealing with that she just doesn't know how to get out of. I will just show you a clip of this movie that you might have already seen. You might want to just tell me if you can hear it. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, can see.
Just tell me if you can hear this, huh?
Yeah.
Can you hear this?
Yeah, sort of.
The video will play. I don't know why it's not playing.
क्या चल रहा है? चलो घर चलो.
Can't see the video, no?
साहब, मैं TC है.
Can't see the video. Can't see the video.
Yeah, even I can't see. I can't understand why it's not showing. Maybe it won't let me because it's Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix doesn't let you share the video.
Share the clip, no?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll play the audio because it's quite a powerful audio. Just tell me if you can hear it. I don't know if some of you have watched the movie. So basically, what happens?
Yes, already watched. Yes.
Sorry?
It's from Darling.
Yes, it's from Darling, the Netflix is screen.
Yeah, so if you've seen it, one of the things that I just wanted to highlight was, this is the part where he's been taken to the prison. Someone has complained against him and they're asking her, do you want to file a complaint? The wife.
गवर्नमेंट के लिए काम करता है मेरी.
कर।
देखा साहब, ऐसे ही धमकाता है और फिर मारता है, बार बार मारता है।
आएगा ही ना मारने को। तुम ऐसा बैठ के ऐसा डरेगा तो आएगा ही मारने को। मारता है, नहीं मारता है, ख्यालों में मारता है, पुलाव में मारता है। अरे बहुत केसेस देखा है ऐसा लाइफ में। कुछ एक्शन लेने का तो बात करो, बोलो। एक सेक्शन है 498A, 3 साल के लिए अंदर जाएगा बिना बेल के। कंप्लेन करने का है।
3 साल, 3 साल बच्चा, इससे अच्छा चांस फिर नहीं मिलेगा।
करने का है कि नहीं करने का है?
बद्रू,
करने का है कि नहीं करने का है?
कंप्लेन करेगी साहब।
कंप्लेन करेगी? मेरे खिलाफ कंप्लेन करेगी बदलू?
चल पुलिस स्टेशन में कान के नीचे बचाओ क्या? चल ऐसे बाहर चल।
साहब एक खुद हाफिज तो बनता है।
दिव्या,
So she says that she will complain and then she goes to talk to him. He's sitting in another room and she goes to talk to him.
मर्द लोग दारू पी के जल्लाद क्यों बन जाते हैं?
क्योंकि औरत बनने देती है।
आप ऐसे ही सुधरोगे? रहो 3 साल अंदर, छूट जाएगी बीमारी।
मैं भी यही सोच रहा था डार्लिंग्स। अभी जाके मेरी ऐसी बुराई करो कि 3 नहीं 4-5 साल के लिए मेरे को अंदर डाले ये लोग।
बस हमजा, ज्यादा बनो मत।
हाँ मैं कमीना हूँ, मैं कमीना हूँ, मेरे को मालूम है। लेकिन मेरा प्यार कमीना नहीं है। सोचो, प्यार नहीं करता तो मारता क्यों? तुम प्यार नहीं करती तो सहन क्यों करती? इस साली दारू किसी दिन छूट जाए।
अबे फालतू का फेक प्रॉमिस मत करो।
मैं कितने बार दारू छोड़ने का, मैं कितने बार ट्राई किया दारू छोड़ने का। पी के तुम पे जुल्म करता हूं, फिर तुम्हारी तकलीफ भुलाने के लिए और पीता हूं। अल्लाह कसम मैं तुम्हारी खुशी चाहता हूं, और मेरे को मालूम है तुम्हारी खुशी किसमें है। सही है, मैं यहां से साफ सुथरा होकर तौबा करके आऊंगा। फिर अपना चांद सा बच्चा है, बेबी हुए तो मैं नाम रखूंगा, बाबा हो तो तुम रखना। करेक्ट? फिर अपना ड्रीम प्लान पूरा करेंगे। मेरे को भी करने का, अकेले मत कर लेना।
अकेले होगा भी नहीं मुझसे।
तो फिर 2-3 साल पॉज मारो अपने प्लान को।
तुम डाइवोर्स क्यों नहीं करवाती?
ऐसे कैसे डाइवोर्स साहब?
So just wanted to highlight, if you notice, I mean, I'm sorry, you couldn't see the video, but for those of you who have seen the movie, there is violence, there's no doubt. And after the violence, this is that period where honeymoon period, where he's saying, I'm sorry, it's because I love you. And many of the times, the person who is abusing also believes that. It's not like he's just saying it. At that moment, he believes it. But the changes that need to happen to reach the stage of stopping the violence or abuse, he's not able to follow through, right? So at that moment, it feels genuine, it is genuine, but it doesn't last very long. And in this movie, if you've not seen this movie, I would recommend it to see, because you can see how her helplessness is there, then there's hope, and then it gets shattered, then there's hope, and it gets shattered, and and the one who is younger, there is abuse in 2 women. The one who is younger is able to, come out of it because she's younger and the learned helplessness is not fully ingrained, right? So a couple more slides I had, but I don't know if anyone has any questions at this point, or shall I just finish off my slides? So just in terms of looking at what is happening for the abuser, right? Now I'm using violence as an example. The reason I'm showing you this complicated sort of flow chart is to know that it is not just one thing, right? It's not like a person has just woken up one day and become violent. There are so many factors that contribute to that person. You know, it starts with genes, their birth history. It can even, we know now, so one of the reasons I work in the perinatal field is I work with pregnant women and postnatal women and their husbands. We know that the adverse conditions during pregnancy and stress can impact on the baby and can also alter their brain psychopathology and can affect, you know, the genes that lead to addiction, dependence. Of course, if this is matched with child abuse, neglect, violence, brain injury, all these different things that can lead to a violent offspring. Now, maybe the child shows some violent tendencies or, you know, conduct behavior, difficult behavior. Then it is up to what environment he gets faced. How do the parents react to that difficult behavior? How did the school react to the difficult behavior? And so you see the either the development of the behavior, it gets validated. And we see that culturally also sometimes, you know, it's okay for men to hit. It's okay for someone to be punished in a certain way. So what the response is that leads to further resulting behavior. It's never only that this person is fully bad. It's a combination of so many things. So when we are working with the perpetrators or convicts, it's a different sort of psychopathology or psychological approach that needs to happen. I think that's pretty much it really in terms of, I just wanted to give you that brief understanding of, you know, psychological background of a victim. But I would really now like to hear of some specific case examples or questions where we feel like I would like to see if you know, what is it that you would like to understand more about such cases? So would it help if we did that now?
I think anybody has any specific questions to ask, but I think, doctor, you have, you know, like most of the things that is domestic violence that is happening, and, you know, that state of denial where the victims actually go to a state of denial when they are not able to realize what they have been undergoing. And perhaps that results in some kind of numbness.
Yeah.
In some kind of numbness. They are not able to project or rather communicate what they have been undergoing. I think that is something which you have clearly explained to us, because most of us, of course, though we are all in the very same field, we have all been working and functioning in this field, there are areas where we have been left unguarded. I mean, like, have been left puzzled, like how to handle this. Why do they behave like this? So perhaps I think you have given a sufficient explanation to it, because this financial dependence and this kind of the state of you know, like that helplessness that is embedded. It's like you feel you accept this is the way you have to, because this is the way you are expected to buy peace in the family. So perhaps that's one reason why these victims, why everyone, for that matter, domestic violence victims or victims of sexual assault, when it comes within the family, they're bound to behave like that. Anybody wants to ask any specific instances, please do.
I will just add a point, like you mentioned, thank you for reminding me, I think I'd missed that, is this patchy memory that they may have, right? Like you said, they may not be able to remember clearly what happened. Of course, it may be one is that they feel like they don't want to put in the effort of remembering, because what is the point? But there is actually something that can happen when they're going through abuse. Their brain can switch off or dissociate, like we call it, to protect them from that violence. So they may actually not register what is going on. So they may not be lying to you when they're saying, I don't remember what happened, because the trauma was so huge that the brain shut down. The brain dissociated and stopped registering what is going on. So that numbness is something that can happen for some people who have gone through a lot of trauma. And then they also become numb in small situations where they may not be that traumatized, but it becomes a protective mechanism. So they switch off.
Yes, they're more like a defense mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely.
They put a shutter down to almost all issues.
Everything.
Perhaps that's some way of, it's some kind of escapism.
Escape.
Which the body has tuned themselves.
Exactly. I think someone has a question, Sabira.
Anyone has questions,
Ma'am,
please do
I
ask.
have a doubt. You also explained everything related to the victims' mental situation.
Please introduce yourself. Please introduce yourself.
Ma'am, my name is Clinton. I'm a BA LLB student. Then I have a doubt. You also explained the mind condition of a victim. Then if we are approaching a victim or we want to give them a mental support, how we can approach them, or what are the important things we want to remember to mingle with them?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I deliberately didn't go into it because it's a whole session in itself. But one of the things that can help is to the first response that they get from you is unconditional listening. They've not had that experience of someone listening without trying to understand if they're telling the truth or not truth or why and all of that. Just listening unconditionally. And even if there may be lies in it, even if they're making up something, the first response is not to find out what is truth or lie. The first response is to listen to them. You don't have to agree also. You don't have to say, yeah, he was wrong or anything like that. You just have to listen to their experience and what it was like for them. Encourage them to talk about how it was and validate that emotion. So if they say it is horrible for me, so you can then comfort them by saying it sounds horrible. What you're describing sounds horrible. You're not saying, yes, it happened or didn't happen. Because I know one of the difficulties for you might be that you cannot, confirm their facts without actually knowing if it is true. So you might want to just give them unconditioned listening. And also, at least for the first couple of sessions, to not have any agenda other than to listen to them and think of safety. You may have other worries that, okay, this person, they may want to take it forward to a case. Should they file a complaint? Should they do an FIR? What should they do? So you may have a lot of these legal advice that you want to give them. But the first couple of sessions needs to be about listening to them, making them feel that they can trust you, and you're not going to force them to do anything like immediately take legal action. Because they've been forced to do so many things, they're not going to be very comfortable with immediately doing something. So if they feel
I just want a clarification here. See, we have a multi-level approach in a sense. Of course, as you said, is listening and hearing them is the first priority, most important aspect. And creating a rapport, and it, in a way, in a psychological so they had or something. But in a way, we're looking in larger spectrum. I know that the victim face a lot of issues. Mostly, some of them sexual abuse happening within their family. So we need to prioritize certain issues. So sometimes, apart from listening, we also need to ask many other questions related to it. It's not necessarily focusing on a psychological aspect, but certain other issues likely to face. So we saw that many of the cases, the victim faced a pressure from their own home to settle the cases, etc. The immediate family members intervened, asking them to retract the statement. So there are a lot of managerial issues. So
correct. I understand. Yeah, and I don't envy that position at all. It sounds very difficult. From what I understand is, I suppose if you can build a trust, like maybe this is something that you can look at, that when you had to prioritize and expedite certain things, did you end up losing out them and they did not go ahead with it? Or were you able to balance it out? Because what we at least are being taught is like we get, families where there is abuse and we know we have to report it. But what we have to do is build the trust so that at least when we report it, they're not going to back off, right? So the building the trust part, we spend more time. I don't think you have the luxury to spend more time. So I wouldn't say take like lots of sessions, but you're right. You may need to prioritize. Just the first thing they should hear from you is more listening, and then prioritize. And I suppose what we end up doing is prioritize safety. If we feel that a minor is being abused right now, even though this person doesn't trust us, we have to take action so that they are separated from the abuser. But even then, we have been told that build the trust first so that it follows through and sees it to a rightful outcome. In the middle, if someone withdraws the complaint, then you may not be able to make it through to its full outcome. So it's a very tricky situation how to know to prioritize. And of course, if they have felt that when they were talking to you that you are trustworthy, that you will try and help them, then even if in the moment they may not agree with you, they may say, okay, I'm not going to do this. They will come back knowing that at some point that they can trust you. But I understand what you're saying. It's very difficult to, you know, because you have so many things to take priority.
I think Professor Bindu John has some questions. She has raised hand.
Good evening. Thank you, sir. Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for the insightful session. Ma'am, I just wanted to ask you one thing. That is, this is from an experience with a friend of mine. She's been married for more than 15 years. She's being abused every other day by her husband. She's being beaten up. And she's very self-sufficient. She has a PhD in psychology and she offers counseling also. And she's not able to get out of this abusive marriage. And they don't have children. And her parents have told her that, you know, she need not take this abuse, but she just refuses to leave this man. And what surprises me is that she's a doctorate in psychology and she's having her own counseling center in Bangalore. And what I wanted to ask was that apart from learned helplessness, I have read somewhere that this kind of women keep going back to their abusers because of the high level of arousal. The brain is addicted. Is it true that once they leave the abuser, then they feel sort of empty? Because then there is nothing that excites them. I mean, okay, when there is an abuse and a fight going on, the brain is aroused, there's physiological arousal, and all that just goes off. And is that a reason also for them to keep going back? And another thing is that we've been friends for 15 years and we keep telling her and she just won't leave. She just won't get out. She'll keep sending us pictures of her beaten up face and her bruises and you know, and she will stop talking to anyone who tells her to leave her husband. So ma'am, this is my question.
No, that's a very good question. What I would say is that, see, instead of arousal, it is a heightened emotional response for sure. But what it is like I explained, you know, that there is an expectation of abuse. There's an expectation of something going wrong. So the body is prepared. There is definitely high adrenaline. So for example, I'm talking to you right now. I have a different level of adrenaline where I have to pay attention to all the questions. If I have to cross the road, my adrenaline response is going to be a little bit higher, right? I have to be very cautious how I'm going to cross the road. So what can happen to someone like this who's been in constant abuse is that their brain has gotten accustomed to expecting and either it happening, which means, okay, it's over, and then feeling a sense of calm afterwards. So the anticipation is very, very difficult. When they are being hit, of course, it's painful, but the anticipation of the abuse is even more stressful because that is high anxiety, not knowing when it's going to happen. And often people have said that when it stops, right, the hitting is stopped, they have left the abuse, but the anticipation is not gone and they don't know how to replace that. And that is very, very difficult for them. So it's that anticipation, which when it culminates in abuse, it's almost like this relief, it's done. Now I don't have to anticipate. Then it's only the calm and the nice things will come till it starts building again. So definitely it's not necessarily an addiction, but it's not knowing how to manage that anticipation, how to understand why am I still feeling like this, you know, and something's wrong. We have this, you know, whole group of people that I work with that they feel like something's worse after the crisis stops. They feel empty. They feel like there is nothing that I have to fight. And then another thing that because they have a low self-esteem, they start thinking, now I have no reason to be irresponsible. I don't have any reason to be late. Everything lies on me. I have to make sure things are going okay because nobody's abusing me anymore, right? So they're functioning. There is an expectation that they have to function better. There's an expectation that they have to live their life better because abuse has stopped. But they have not grown. You see, they haven't grown in all these years. So there is a rightful worry that I have to now manage on my own. I have to do everything well. There is, can you understand? So many things are mixed up in their head. And unfortunately, you know, just like your friend, the level of intelligence or education doesn't really stop someone from being a victim. And sometimes, and I see this in doctors also, the higher they are in their qualification, the more difficult it is for them to show their vulnerability to outside, right? And especially psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors are like, I should be able to manage this. What will people think if this comes out? So I cannot show my vulnerable side to anyone. And some of this, I'm assuming your friend would probably make a very good counselor. She'd be very good at managing other people's problems, but her vulnerability cannot be exposed because that intelligence level prevents her from being just vulnerable.
Correct. Yes,
So
ma'am.
one of the things that can help, of course, you have given her all the advice, and we are faced with this constantly. As therapists or doctors, we can only advise them. What I sort of do is you don't leave him, you leave him, but this should be your safety plan. In the middle of the night, if you feel unsafe, you have we say, okay, who can you go to? So there'll be some friend who will say, my house is open to you whenever you need to, whenever you want to, if you want to come. So some kind of safety outlets, if they have, then that becomes like a backup, because right now they don't know what is the backup going to look like. So giving them some safety outlets can be a starting point for them to think it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to ask for help.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, ma'am. No, I'm Advocate Varsha. Normally what happens is during our childhood, when we get beatings from our parents, what parents says is, it is out of love we are giving it. So that is the thing, what remains in our mind, that it is out of love. What the movie shows also, it is like that. He was saying that it is out of love he is giving that beating. So in our mind, from the childhood itself, it is there in our mind that wherever the love, you have to, that like doctrine of election, whenever you have to, when rose, you have to, the beauty of the rose, you have to
survive the thorns
also.
also.
The thorns also you have to. So it is the same thing happening in each and everyone's life. But actually there is no solution for that. Only like from the childhood itself, this is happening. Because we are convinced like that. Because it is out of love only, everything is happening. And after in the married life also, we believe that, yes, it will be out of love. Because maybe this is the manner how they are expressing the love.
And that is why I think, like I said, in the Indian context, this is something that is definitely one of the factors. Even before they reach the abuser, so many things are ingrained in them that they are not able to see this as abuse. And not only that they don't see it as abuse, they think it is a form of love, which is even more dangerous.
But I think now there is a transition, doctor. Right now there is a transition, because I think of late there is a feeling among children as well, because they consider it as like their self-respect is affected or their privacy is affected if we try to beat them, or if, for that matter, even if we try to raise our voices against them. So I think there is a transition, which there is a change from the conventional parenting style also.
Definitely.
Yes. Perhaps when there is a change in that manner, the present generation will start thinking differently.
Yeah.
And of course, perhaps this kind of domestic violence, this patriarchal thought system will also have a change in the process.
Yeah, we can hope so. Definitely the fact that, there is work happening here, as gloomy as it seems, I feel like even if after speaking to 100 women, if you are able to help one, it's still worth it. But it's not easy. It's still worth it, because slowly there will be some change. I think Bodhini would want to ask something.
Yeah, my name is Reena. I'm working for Bodhini. It's an NGO working in the space of online safety. So just wanted to know about your take on victim mentality in online safety issues and trafficking, because that's where we've seen more of victims. So there's a, when you talk about domestic violence victims and victims of trafficking and online safety, there is a difference in their how they project themselves in their mindset. And would you be able to share some thoughts on that?
Sure. Again, the whole area of the cyber world and cyberbullying, and the kind of matrix that is there in the online world, it's very different. But some of the principles kind of apply, you know, like if you think about the learned helplessness, what can happen, unfortunately, in the online world is that people can portray themselves however they want. So the victim or the abuser can portray themselves. And unfortunately, in the online world, I mean, I will come to the trafficking part, but even before that, what can happen is people who are not even usually abusive, or say in the normal course of things, we may not say something very rude, but in a mass kind of setting, people become emboldened to say something against each other. So online, the chances of passing hurtful comments, abusive comments is so much higher. And people who don't even realize that they are crossing boundaries, they're violating someone's privacy. People share videos, you know, left, right, and center without checking if it's okay. So the online world can be very difficult for someone who already has vulnerabilities. So they are likely to be, you know, fall prey to potential perpetrators, because wherever they go, they may go to Instagram or, you know, Facebook or whatever. The way they might feel accepted can be so difficult that the vulnerable ones can be easily picked up by the predators, right? And that is why in online, it is so much easier for trafficking, for someone getting picked up, because they think, oh, this is right for me, because the experience I had anywhere else is so horrible. And there is what is called as grooming that can happen. So grooming is somewhere where the abuser, the perpetrator, takes some time to build the trust with this victim, potential victim, makes them believe that what they are doing is the best thing for them. And that grooming, the amount of time that is spent in grooming can be also very attractive, because if you think, let's say someone who's vulnerable is, say, coming from a family where there may not be a lot of trauma, but some conflict, and it's okay, it's not a very great environment. Then they go online amongst their school friends, college friends, there's so much trolling, there's body shaming, all that is happening. So they are vulnerable. And the moment a vulnerable person is identified, then they get groomed, they get sort of, you know, an experience that they've never had before. Someone is paying attention to them, but they're not able to judge, because by then they've lost the capacity to judge who is genuine, who is not genuine. Everybody seems to be either nice or terrible, so they can't judge. So their capacity to judge goes, all our capacity. I mean, it's very hard to judge, right, online, who is genuine and who is not. So they become, it's a very ripe space for grooming. And when there is grooming, the chances of them then getting carried away can be very strong. And that's why the cyberspace, where bullying can occur even from people who don't come from abusive backgrounds, we can be inadvertently contributing to someone who is vulnerable in succumbing to these predators. And predators are there in all sorts of ways, right? They can sort of conceal their original identity, and they can pretend to be someone else. I don't know if it answers your question, but
yeah, to a degree it does. It's just that with, like you said about learned helplessness, online grooming, and I mean, one of the major issues we are seeing now is children and adults falling prey to threats and blackmail, and issues related to those. So there's just fear more than, I mean, and then of course leading to trafficking. So there's more fear as such. And like you said, maybe online grooming also, there has to be a little more awareness on those spaces, because it's very crucial to understand how a child could get groomed online. And, you know, just like how it works for a domestic violence victim.
Yeah. Cyberbullying and cyber grooming are very, very crucial to teach the kids, because see, the other thing is, I feel as adults who did not grow up with this kind of internet access, even our way of helping is limited. Like, we only have to understand what is going on to figure out how to help the children. What you also mentioned, you know, like this, let's say a potential victim is someone who may already have a low self-esteem and may have said something that is not entirely true about their identity. So they are more likely to succumb to blackmail, because they're scared that what they said as a lie, harmless lie, will come out, you know. So the potentially weak ones, vulnerable ones, are the ones who are more going to fall prey. and their worry that, oh, my lie is going to be revealed, then they have something that the blackmailer can hold against them. So those things are really important, that more, knowledge needs to spread about not just sharing and our identity or sharing our confidential details, but how we can get carried away very easily by people we don't know anything about. That also needs to be shared. I think you're right there.
Inquisitiveness also, that too adds.
Yeah.
This aspect regarding cyber bullying and all that. I think they expose themselves, they give their own details too much.
Yeah.
And which is why
youngsters are just trying to belong somewhere. They just want to belong.
Yes.
So if they're being rejected by their college group, they will try to belong somewhere else. They'll try. So that is the most important thing.
Attention seeking.
Yeah.
Basically.
And it is actually a natural phase of their life. To be focusing on their peers is very natural. Unfortunately, for this current generation of adolescents, their peers are no longer limited to only school classroom. It is through all these different social media.
Yes.
So it is very difficult for them to not get carried away.
What you said about being vulnerable also, during the pandemic itself, there was at least 85% increase in this in the search for child abuse material online.
Wow.
So it's not just the vulnerable anymore. It's just about predators knowing how well to manipulate the victim, because there's so many relationships that's happened that's been built up over the past 2 years for the need of money because of the financial situation now. There are children being groomed into that. I mean, even more so, children being groomed so that the videos and photographs are sold online.
Okay.
So that is also another aspect that really needs to be out there, and maybe education on that. Or at least maybe what people might not realize is that the trauma in those spaces are just as real. A child being threatened is being, with the help of a gadget. Okay, someone is abusing you in your peer group. There is a distance, but if someone is blackmailing you through a gadget, or a child is going through that 24/7, they are exposed to it with a lack of sleep. So it's like one vicious cycle where the traumatic effect can be as bad.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. And it cannot be understood by maybe their parent. They may not realize the impact of this can be so traumatic.
There have been a lot of instances during the COVID period when there has been a lot of suicides of youngsters, young children, like minors, when they had been denied access to the phone. So, and I think even some of the psychologists here also, they know, because there have been a lot of instances where parents had to contact them for immediate help. Because I know, we personally know instances where children among us, I mean, of our colleagues, have created a lot of ruckus in our families. Like they get themselves shut up in rooms. They don't open the doors because they don't want the gadget to be taken off from them. They create a lot of problems in the house, because we know among us only, we know that has been happening.
Another side to it is that some of the suicides have other history behind them, other than addictions, other than gaming, where the child was being used also. Like you rightly pointed out, some of the suicides have that background also.
True.
The reason I basically brought this up was, because each needs to be dealt with. So I just wanted to know about, whether there's more specific information in that space, because there are specific organizations also dealing with predators on online safe spaces. So just wanted to know about the trauma related to
yeah, so definitely we are seeing a lot of that as well, the trauma related to online bullying. The difficulty we are experiencing is that they are not willing to reveal a lot, because the youngsters feel like they will be blamed because they were at fault. So we are dealing with just the trauma part. Of course, it also goes hand in hand for some people where there is digital addiction, right? They are addicted to that not addicted in that sense, but they're also so dependent on that gadget that the gadget is causing trauma now to them through the person who's blackmailing. So definitely I don't know about anyone in Bangalore who's dealing specifically with it, but we know that the Cyber Crime Bureau works with different NGOs. There is a clinic in Nimhans called the Shut Clinic that is dealing specifically with digital addiction and behavioral problems that arise from it. And they end up seeing people who may have, the family bring the child with the saying that he's always on the gadget. Then sometimes the history reveals that they may have actually also been bullied and abused through the online medium. So, there is, I think this is such a new and emerging space and needs a lot of multi-pronged approach, especially in school, awareness building and all of that, rather than just addressing it after something has occurred.
Actually, we women lawyers, we have a project. It's called Child Online Protection Teams, building child online protection teams, and we have had sessions. We have had sessions in our city. We had a toolkit, and we had the help of the Kerala police, also the Cyber Dome, also. And you wouldn't believe, Doctor, each time we have had the sessions with them. After the sessions, the kind of questions that we had to face. And the children were really like taken aback. They were not aware of such issues at all. Perhaps they were, as you said, they were playing with a gadget and everything was new to them. And they were like, getting carried away by all that. But after our sessions, we have had an array of questions which have been very shocking also. And we had a collection of data also. And then we just finished our project work about a week back. So it has been like, it has been shocking revelations before the COVID and after the COVID. We had 2 phases. Of course, that was not planned, but then it so happened because though we had initiated or we had started the project earlier, because of the COVID period, we had to stop it because it was vis-a-vis the students. So since the schools were not functioning, so we had to have an online session after the post-COVID. I mean, like post-COVID sessions were online. So the data has been very overwhelming, actually.
It should be very interesting, actually. So Karnataka needs to do that as well. I think other states should adopt that and do the project. I remember I did I do some sessions in schools. So I've done a session on cyberbullying. Of course, my session was more on, how to be kind to your friends and don't troll them and things like that. And I gave a little bit of a background to how to stay safe and not reveal their identity. But the response I got, one of the worrying response I got was, if someone is going to tease me, I will tease them back. Why should I not, troll them back? So this, like we talk about, how can a violence beget more violence and create this culture of unsafety online? The unsafe spaces online are just created like this through a mob mentality. And the children were like, if someone is teasing my friend, I'm going to fight with him and maybe I'll put him down also. What is there? I'm going to tease him back. If he uses that language, I will use that language. And it's very hard to argue with that kind of mentality, in the beginning at least. So
it's difficult to convince them. That's the wrong approach.
Exactly.
Very difficult to convince.
Yeah.
Sir, can we wind up, sir?
Sure.
Can we wind up, sir?
Yes, we can.
Anybody has any more questions to be asked the doctor?
You can also share my email if anyone has any other follow-up questions. I'm happy.
Yes. Doctor, could you please share it?
Yeah.
On the screen?
Put it in the chat window.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ashlesha. It was a wonderful session. I think it was, interactions were also good. And thank you, sir, for affording us this opportunity. Thank you all for having been a part of this. The gain was entirely ours. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Mini, for hosting the meeting as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So
Good
much
night,
for
sir.
inviting me.
Thank you.
Hope
Thank you,
we'll
Doctor.
meet in same platform.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, doctor. Good night, doctor.
Bye. Good night.